Ed and Mabel Lawrence were just a regular retired couple when they first stepped onto the Ocean Serenity. What was supposed to be a simple 2-week getaway to celebrate years of hard work and a life spent in routine quickly turned into something far more unusual. The moment they stepped onto the ship, there was a sense of calm, almost magical, that they hadn't felt in years. Away from the pressures of daily life, the buzzing of phones, emails, and schedules, they felt an unexpected freedom. For the first time in decades, it seemed like the world had slowed down just for them. They found themselves walking along the deck, watching the waves stretch endlessly toward the horizon, and thinking that maybe, just maybe, this trip could be more than a short vacation. It could become a new way of life. At first, Ed and Mabel just imagined staying a few extra days, maybe a week, adding a small extension to their original plan. But then, a strange thought took root in their minds. What if they never had to leave? The idea was thrilling, almost unthinkable, but the more they watched other passengers disembark and new travelers board, the more they realized that no one would notice if they slipped quietly into the background. Slowly, cautiously, they began putting small plans into place. They would blend in with each new group, switch cabins when necessary, and avoid standing out in any way. Their 2-week escape quietly became a carefully managed experiment in invisibility. Living secretly on the ship turned out to be far more complex than they had imagined. Every move required careful thought. They needed to maintain the appearance of casual tourists, while never revealing the full truth of their prolonged presence. They ate in different restaurants, attended shows only occasionally, and kept their conversations light and non-specific. Mabel developed the art of chatting casually with other passengers about ports and excursions, while Ed asked seemingly innocent questions about past trips, pretending he was as new to cruising as anyone else. Every interaction was a careful balance, enough to appear friendly, but not enough to reveal that they had been sailing for months, and eventually years, without leaving. Each day became a carefully choreographed routine. They learned when the crowds would be largest and avoided them, choosing quiet corners of the ship to read, sip tea, or watch the sunset. Mornings were spent wandering the deck, feeling the sun warm their skin, while the gentle rhythm of the ocean set a pace they could control. Nights were reserved for slow walks through empty hallways, watching the waves crash under the moonlight. In the beginning, they were tense, constantly on alert, but over time, their careful habits transformed into something almost meditative. They had become shadows on the Ocean Serenity, quietly observing the world, while remaining largely unseen themselves. Of course, they couldn't completely avoid attention. Occasionally, crew members began to recognize them. A familiar face at the buffet, a bartender who remembered their regular orders, a staff member from the entertainment team. They all noticed Ed and Mabel's ongoing presence. But the couple adapted quickly. They shifted dining times, tried new routes across the ship, and varied their routines to remain unpredictable. Every day was a strategic game of observation and adaptation, with the unspoken goal of staying invisible to those around them. It wasn't always easy. Sometimes they would glance at new passengers and wonder if anyone had caught on. But so far, their plan was working. Their secret life aboard the ship, however, was never destined to last forever. The first crack came in the most mundane of ways: the laundry. A young staff member collecting clothes from their cabin noticed something odd. Ed and Mabel's laundry schedule didn't match the typical 2-week rotation of most passengers. At first, it seemed like a minor curiosity, barely worth noting, but as she mentioned it casually to a coworker, the idea slowly began to spread. More crew members started to take notice. Waiters realized they had been serving the same couple for months. Entertainment staff recalled seeing them at multiple shows spanning different voyages. And slowly, the quiet murmurs became more structured observation. Eventually, the ship's officers began a discreet investigation. Someone checked the passenger records and noticed the most unusual detail. Ed and Mabel weren't listed on recent passenger lists, yet they still had an active cabin. The discovery was quietly alarming. What started as a casual observation from a laundry worker had escalated into a full investigation, yet the couple remained blissfully unaware of the growing scrutiny. They continued their routine, reading, walking, observing, laughing quietly, with passing passengers, entirely focused on the life they had built aboard the ship. When they were finally called to the ship's office, Ed and Mabel approached it with a mix of curiosity and calm. They had always known that someone would eventually notice, but hearing it confirmed was another matter entirely. The captain and a few officers sat them down, gently explaining that the crew had become aware of how long they had been aboard. They listened quietly as the couple recounted their story, What began as a short vacation had quietly stretched into 10 full years. Life at sea had become their normal. Bills, appointments, and obligations had ceased to exist. Every day was dictated by the rhythm of the ocean, the gentle sway of the ship, and the quiet companionship of one another. The captain, though initially surprised, realized that technically, Ed and Mabel had broken no laws. They had simply slipped through the system, exploiting a gap in oversight. There were questions about how this had been possible and what it meant for future travelers, but he chose to handle it discreetly. Instead of creating a scene, he offered a compromise. They could stay until the current voyage ended, after which they would need to leave. The couple accepted, without protest, though the reality of stepping back onto solid ground after a decade at sea weighed heavily on them. During those final weeks, Ed and Mabel savored every moment. They returned to their favorite spots, the quiet deck where they had watched countless sunsets, the hidden library nook where Mabel loved to read, the small cafes tucked away from the bustling crowds. Each meal, each walk, each conversation with passing passengers was tinged with nostalgia. They had created a life that was both ordinary and extraordinary, and now they were saying goodbye. On the last day, hand in hand, they walked down the gangway, feeling the strange, almost alien solidity of land beneath their feet. Their home had been sold long ago, and the transition to life on land was overwhelming. Everything moved too fast, too loud, and felt boxed in compared to the endless horizon they had grown used to. Despite the challenges of returning to land, the sea continued to call to them. A year later, they booked a short trip back to the Ocean Serenity. The ship itself remained the same, even if the crew had changed. Each familiar corner, each quiet hallway, stirred old memories and reignited their love for cruising. They shared their experiences with fellow travelers, offering advice about life at sea, while carefully keeping the full story of their hidden years a secret. They continued to explore, eventually planning a full world cruise, visiting every continent. Each stop was a celebration of the freedom they had cultivated, a tribute to the life they had carved out for themselves. Eventually, they slowed down, settling into a quiet coastal town with a small cottage by the shore. The rhythm of life here was gentler, but the ocean remained close, offering the same peace and quiet that had first drawn them aboard the ship. Their story became a legend among cruise ship travelers, a tale of quiet rebellion, patience, and careful planning. Old crew members occasionally visited, sharing laughs over past close calls, and reminiscing about a couple who had managed the impossible. Ed and Mabel found comfort in the simple joys: morning coffee, quiet walks by the shore, and the profound satisfaction of living life entirely on their own terms. One evening, as the sun set over the calm waves, Mabel looked at Ed and whispered, "We did it." He squeezed her hand, understanding without words. They had lived a life full of adventure, freedom, and love, creating memories that would last forever. Their decade-long journey at sea was a testament to the extraordinary things that happen when ordinary people dare to dream bigger than the world expects. And though they had returned to land, the rhythm of the ocean would always be a part of them, a quiet reminder of a life lived fully and courageously, entirely on their own terms.